I never thought I'd be the one to say why my husband is cheating on me with my best friend. But here I am, living a nightmare I couldn't have imagined. Have you ever felt like your whole life was a lie? That's how I felt when I first suspected something was off. The late nights, the secret phone calls, the way he'd say her name in his sleep. I thought I knew my husband. I thought I knew my best friend. But as I uncovered layer after layer of betrayal, I realized I didn't know them at all. This is my story of heartbreak, betrayal, and ultimately redemption. It's not pretty, it's not easy, but it's real. They say what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. But when your world is shattered, how do you pick up the pieces and find the strength to go on? I never thought I'd be telling this story, but here I am. Life has a way of surprising you, doesn't it? I guess I should start at the beginning, back when everything seemed perfect. Or at least I thought it was. I'm Sarah, and for 10 years I was married to Mark. We met in college, fell in love, and tied the knot soon after graduation. We were the couple everyone envied, successful, happy, and seemingly destined for a fairy tale ending. I worked as an accountant, crunching numbers all day, but I loved it. There's something satisfying about balancing books and making everything add up. Mark was a sales manager, always the charmer. He could sell ice to Eskimos, as they say. We both had good jobs, a nice house, and plans for the future. Kids, maybe, once we felt ready. Our life together was comfortable. We had our routines. Every morning, I'd wake up early to go for a run. Exercise helps me clear my head, you know. When I'd get back, Mark would be in the kitchen, brewing coffee for both of us. He'd always have my mug ready, the one with little cats all over it that he'd given me for our first anniversary. "Morning, sweetheart," he'd say, giving me a peck on the cheek. "How was your run?" "Good," I'd reply, gulping down water. "Thanks for the coffee." We'd chat about our plans for the day over breakfast. Nothing too exciting, just normal stuff. Work, errands, maybe plans with friends for the weekend. It was nice, though, stable, safe. I remember this one morning clearly. It was a Tuesday, I think. I'd made a big breakfast, pancakes, eggs, the works. It was our anniversary, and I wanted to start the day off special. "Wow, look at this spread," Mark exclaimed when he came downstairs. "What's the occasion?" I laughed. "You're kidding, right?" He looked confused for a moment, then his eyes widened. "Oh God, it's our anniversary, isn't it? I'm so sorry, Sarah. Work's been crazy." And I completely forgot. I felt a twinge of disappointment, but I brushed it off. "It's okay," I said, forcing a smile. "I know you've been busy. Let's just enjoy breakfast." He promised to make it up to me with a nice dinner that weekend. I believed him. Why wouldn't I? He was my husband, my partner. We trusted each other. Looking back, maybe that was the first sign. But at the time, I didn't think much of it. People forget things sometimes, right? It doesn't have to mean anything. We went about our day as usual. I headed to the office, buried myself in spreadsheets and financial reports. At lunch, I met up with my best friend, Emily. We'd known each other since high school, and she was like a sister to me. "So, how's the anniversary going?" she asked as we sat down with our salads. I shrugged. Mark forgot. Emily's eyebrows shot up. "What? That's not like him." "I know, but he's been really stressed with work lately." "It's fine, really." She didn't look convinced, but she didn't push it. Instead, she changed the subject, telling me about her latest dating disaster. Emily was always dating someone new, always looking for the one now. I sometimes envied her freedom, but then I'd remind myself how lucky I was to have found Mark. That evening, I came home to find a bouquet of roses on the kitchen counter and Mark cooking dinner. The smell of garlic and herbs filled the air. "Happy anniversary, love," he said, pulling me into a hug. "I'm sorry about this morning. I wanted to make it up to you." I melted into his embrace, all my earlier disappointment fading away. This was the Mark I knew and loved, thoughtful, caring, always trying to make things right. We had a lovely dinner. laughing and talking like we used to when we first started dating. He even suggested we take a weekend trip soon, just the two of us. It was perfect. As we cleared the dishes together, Mark's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then quickly turned it face down. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Yeah, just work," he said, not quite meeting my eyes. "You know how it is." I did know, or I thought I did. Work was important to both of us, and sometimes it spilled over into our personal time. It was just part of being successful, right? We spent the rest of the evening cuddled up on the couch, watching our favorite show. It was comfortable, familiar, safe. I fell asleep in his arms, feeling loved and secure. If only I'd known then what was coming. But isn't that always the way? We never see the storm clouds gathering until it's too late. And boy, was there a storm coming my way. The first time I noticed something was off, I brushed it aside. It was just a weird coincidence, right? I mean, people say all sorts of things in their sleep. It doesn't have to mean anything. It happened on a regular Tuesday night. I'd gone to bed early because I had a big presentation at work the next day. Mark stayed up late, saying he had some emails to catch up on. I was already half asleep when he finally came to bed. I woke up in the middle of the night, thirsty. As I reached for the glass of water on my nightstand, I heard Mark mumbling in his sleep. Now, this wasn't unusual. He often talked in his sleep. Usually nonsense about work or sports. But this time was different. This time, he said a name. Emily. At first, I thought I'd misheard. I mean, Emily was my best friend. Why would Mark be dreaming about her? I listened closer, and there it was again. Emily. So beautiful. My heart started racing. I told myself I was being silly. Emily was gorgeous, sure, but lots of people were beautiful. It didn't mean anything. Maybe he'd just seen her picture on my phone or something. I tried to go back to sleep, but I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling in my stomach. When morning came, I was exhausted. "You okay, honey?" Mark asked as we had breakfast. "You look tired." I forced a smile. "Yeah, just nervous about my presentation." He reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "You'll do great. You always do." I wanted to ask him about what he'd said in his sleep, but I chickened out. It seemed silly in the light of day. Besides, I had to focus on my presentation. The day went by in a blur. My presentation went well, but I couldn't shake the nagging feeling in the back of my mind. When I got home that evening, Mark wasn't there. I called his cell, but it went straight to voicemail. An hour later, he walked in, looking flustered. "Sorry I'm late," he said, giving me a quick peck on the cheek. "Got held up at work. Big project coming up." "Oh," I tried to keep my voice casual. "What kind of project?" He waved his hand dismissively. "Just boring work stuff. You don't want to hear about it." But I did. I wanted to hear everything. I wanted to know why he was coming home late, why he was saying my best friend's name in his sleep. I wanted answers to questions I was afraid to ask. Instead, I just nodded and went to heat up some leftovers for dinner. As we ate, Mark kept checking his phone, smiling at whatever he saw on the screen. "Good news?" I asked, trying to peek at his phone. He quickly turned it face down. "Nah, just a funny meme Dave sent." Dave was his coworker, always sending stupid jokes. It was probably nothing, but why did he seem so secretive about it? That night, as we got ready for bed, I decided to test the waters. "Hey, have you talked to Emily recently?" I asked, watching his reaction in the mirror. He paused for a second, then continued brushing his teeth. "No, why?" "Oh, no reason," I said, trying to sound nonchalant. "Just haven't seen her in a while. Thought maybe she'd reached out to you about something." He shook his head. "Nope, haven't heard from her." I nodded, not sure if I felt relieved or more suspicious. We went to bed, and I lay awake for hours, listening to Mark's steady breathing, wondering what was going on in his head. The next few days were a roller coaster. Sometimes everything seemed normal. We'd laugh over dinner, watch our favorite shows, and I'd think I was being paranoid. But then there'd be moments, a secretive phone call, a late night at the office that would bring all my doubts rushing back. I started paying more attention to the little things, the way he'd angle his phone away from me when texting, how he'd suddenly become vague when I asked about his day at work, the fact that he hadn't initiated sex in weeks. One night, about a week after the sleep-talking incident, I woke up to find Mark's side of the bed empty. I heard his voice coming from the living room, speaking in hushed tones. I crept to the door, my heart pounding. I could only make out bits and pieces of the conversation. I know, he was saying. It's complicated. I can't just... We need to be careful. I wanted to burst into the room, to demand answers, but fear held me back. What if I was wrong? What if this was all in my head? I went back to bed, pretending to be asleep when Mark returned. He slipped under the covers, and I felt him place a gentle kiss on my shoulder. The gesture that used to bring me comfort now left me cold. The next morning, I asked him about the phone call. He said it was work-related, a crisis with a client that needed immediate attention. It was a perfectly reasonable explanation. So why didn't I believe him? I found myself watching him constantly, analyzing every word, every gesture. Was he really working late, or was he meeting someone? Why was he so protective of his phone lately? And why, oh why, had he said Emily's name in his sleep? I knew I was driving myself crazy, but I couldn't stop. The trust that had been the foundation of our relationship was crumbling, and I didn't know how to fix it, or if I even wanted to. Part of me wanted to confront him, to demand the truth, but another part was terrified of what that truth might be. So I stayed silent, watching and waiting, as the distance between us grew larger with each passing day. Little did I know, this was just the beginning. The signs were there, clear as day, but I wasn't ready to see them yet. Sometimes, I think we blind ourselves to the truth because it's easier than facing reality. But reality has a way of making itself known, whether we're ready for it or not. As days turned into weeks, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was seriously wrong. It was like living in a fog, where nothing quite made sense anymore. The signs kept piling up, and I couldn't ignore them any longer. One evening, I was doing laundry when I found a receipt in Mark's pocket. It was for a fancy restaurant downtown, dated last Tuesday, a night he'd told me he was working late. My hands shook as I stared at the paper. 2 entrees, 2 glasses of wine. He hadn't been alone. I confronted him about it when he got home. "Oh, that," he said, barely glancing at the receipt. "Yeah, I had a business dinner with a client. Forgot to mention it." "A client," I repeated, my voice flat. "And you just forgot to tell me?" He shrugged, not meeting my eyes. "It slipped my mind. It's not a big deal, Sarah." But it was a big deal. It was a huge deal, because my husband, the man I'd trusted for 10 years, was lying to my face. And I knew it. From that moment on, I started noticing more and more things that didn't add up. Like how Mark suddenly became obsessed with his appearance. He started going to the gym regularly, bought new clothes, even changed his cologne. When I commented on it, he brushed it off. "Just trying to stay healthy," he'd say. "Don't want to let myself go, you know?" But I couldn't help wondering who he was trying to impress. It certainly didn't seem to be me. Then there was the laptop incident. Mark had always been protective of his work computer, but this was different. One afternoon, I was in our home office, looking for a stapler. Mark's laptop was open on the desk, and I noticed a message pop up on the screen. Before I could read it, Mark burst into the room. "What are you doing?" he snapped, slamming the laptop shut. I jumped, startled by his reaction. "I was just looking for a stapler. I wasn't..." "You shouldn't be snooping around my work stuff," he interrupted, his face red with anger. Or was it fear? "I wasn't snooping," I said, my own anger rising. "But now I'm wondering if maybe I should be..." He softened then, running a hand through his hair. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to yell. It's just, there's some sensitive client information on there." I could get in trouble if anyone saw it. I nodded, but I didn't believe him, not for a second. The Mark I knew would have calmly explained that from the start. This Mark, the one standing in front of me with panic in his eyes, was a stranger. That night, I lay awake, listening to Mark's steady breathing beside me. I thought about the woman I'd been just a few months ago, so sure of my life, my marriage. Now, I felt like I was standing on quicksand. "No one?" he said quickly. "Just checking work emails." At 2 in the morning, he shrugged. "You know how it is. Work never stops." But I did know how it was, and this wasn't it. The Mark I married would never prioritize work emails over sleep. He valued his rest too much. This Mark, whoever he was a workaholic I didn't recognize. The final straw came when I tried to surprise him at work one day. I thought maybe if I could see him in his element, surrounded by his colleagues, I'd recognize my husband again. I'd see the man I fell in love with, and all these doubts would melt away. I walked into his office building, a bunch of his favorite flowers in my hand. But when I got to his floor, his secretary gave me a strange look. "Oh, Mrs. Thompson," she said, sounding flustered. "Mark's not here. He's out at a client meeting." "Oh," I said, trying to hide my disappointment. "Do you know when he'll be back?" She glanced at her computer screen. Not until late, I'm afraid. He's got back-to-back meetings all afternoon." I nodded, thanked her, and left. But as I was waiting for the elevator, I overheard 2 of Mark's coworkers talking. "Did you see Mark and that blonde leave together again?" one of them said. "Third time this week." "I know," the other replied. "If I didn't know better, I'd think." They trailed off as they noticed me standing there. Their faces paled, and they hurried away without another word. I rode the elevator down in a daze, my mind reeling. A blonde woman, meeting outside the office, lies about his schedule. It all added up to one terrible conclusion, one I'd been avoiding for weeks. My husband was having an affair. As I stepped out onto the street, still clutching those stupid flowers, I felt like I couldn't breathe. The world was spinning around me, everything I thought I knew crashing down. I wandered aimlessly for hours, ignoring the calls and texts from Mark asking where I was. When I finally went home, I'd made a decision. I wasn't going to confront him. Not yet. I needed proof. Real, undeniable proof. Because if my suspicions were right, if Mark really was cheating on me, then everything was about to change. And I needed to be ready. I never thought I'd become the kind of person who spies on their spouse. But there I was, turning into a regular Sherlock Holmes. It started small, just paying more attention to the little things. But soon, I was in full-on investigation mode. The first thing I did was check our phone bill. I know it sounds crazy, but I had to start somewhere, right? And let me tell you, what I found made my stomach churn. There was this one number that kept popping up, calls at odd hours, sometimes lasting for ages. I didn't recognize it, but my gut told me it wasn't just some work colleague. I tried calling the number once, when Mark was in the shower. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst out of my chest. But no one answered, just a generic voicemail message. I hung up without leaving a message, feeling like a complete idiot. Next, I started paying more attention to Mark's schedule. He'd always been pretty open about his day-to-day before, but now everything was vague. "Oh, I've got meetings all day," he'd say, or "I might be home late, don't wait up." It was like living with a stranger. One day, I decided to follow him. God, I felt so pathetic doing it, like something out of a bad movie. I told my boss I had a doctor's appointment and left work early. Then I parked down the street from Mark's office and waited. He came out around 5:30, looking all sharp in his suit. But instead of heading to his car, he started walking down the street. I followed at a distance, feeling like the world's worst spy. He ended up at this little cafe a few blocks away, and there she was, blonde, gorgeous, probably 10 years younger than me. My heart sank. They sat there for over an hour, talking and laughing. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but I could see how he looked at her. It was the way he used to look at me, back when we first started dating. All sparkling eyes and secret smiles. I wanted to march over there and confront them both, but I didn't. I just sat in my car, crying my eyes out, until they left. Separately, thank God. Small mercies, right? When Mark got home that night, he acted like nothing was wrong. Kissed me on the cheek, asked about my day. I wanted to scream, to throw things, to demand answers, but I didn't. I just smiled and said everything was fine, like I hadn't spent the afternoon watching my marriage crumble before my eyes. After that, I became obsessed with finding more proof. I started waking up in the middle of the night to check Mark's phone, but he always had it locked, and I didn't know the passcode. I tried guessing it a few times, but no luck. It was probably something to do with her anyway. I even considered hiring a private investigator at one point. Can you believe it? Me, hiring someone to spy on my own husband. But I couldn't bring myself to do it. It felt like admitting defeat, you know? Like if I had to go that far, then my marriage was already over. One night, I couldn't sleep. Mark was snoring away next to me, and all I could think about was that blonde woman. Who was she? What did she have that I didn't? I got up and went to the kitchen, thinking maybe some warm milk would help me sleep. That's when I saw Mark's work bag on the counter. He must have forgotten to take it to the bedroom. And right there, sticking out of the front pocket, was his laptop. I stood there for what felt like hours, just staring at that bag. I knew it was wrong. I knew if I looked, there was no going back. But I also knew I couldn't live like this anymore, with all these questions eating away at me. So I did it. I took out the laptop and turned it on. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely type. But then I hit another wall. It was password protected. Of course it was. I tried a few obvious ones. Our anniversary, his birthday, even the name of his childhood dog. Nothing worked. I was about to give up when I had a crazy thought. I typed in Emily. And just like that, I was in Emily, my best friend's name. The name he'd said in his sleep all those weeks ago. God, how could I have been so blind? I felt sick as I started going through his emails. There were hundreds of them, all from Emily, flirty messages, lunch plans, even a few pictures that made me want to throw up. It was all there in black and white. The proof I'd been looking for. I must have made some kind of noise, because the next thing I knew, Mark was standing in the doorway. He looked from me to the laptop, and his face went white. "Sarah," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "I can explain." But I didn't want explanations. But I held up my hand. "Just go. We'll talk tomorrow, but right now I can't even look at you." And just like that, he left. I heard the front door close, and then silence. I sat there in the dark kitchen for hours, crying until I had no tears left. When the sun came up, I made a decision. I wasn't going to be a victim. I wasn't going to let this destroy me. I was going to fight back. And God helped Mark, because he had no idea what was coming. After that night, everything changed. I was on a mission, determined to uncover every last detail of Mark's betrayal. But let me tell you, it wasn't easy. Have you ever tried to investigate someone who knows all your moves? It's like playing chess with someone who can read your mind. I started with Mark's phone. I knew he always kept it close, but I had to find a way to get into it. One morning, while he was in the shower, I managed to grab it. My heart was racing as I tried to guess his passcode. Our anniversary? Nope. His birthday? No luck. I was about to give up when I had a crazy thought. I typed in Emily's birthday. Bingo. I was in. But just as I started scrolling through his messages, I heard the shower turn off. Panic set in. I quickly put the phone back where I found it and pretended to be busy making coffee when Mark walked in. "Everything okay?" he asked, eyeing me suspiciously. "Yeah, why wouldn't it be?" I replied, hoping my voice didn't betray me. I felt like I was so close to the truth. but it was always just out of reach. One day, I decided to take a different approach. I called Emily, asking if she wanted to meet for coffee. My stomach was in knots as I waited for her at our usual cafe. When she walked in, all smiles and hugs, I almost lost my nerve. How could she sit there, acting like everything was normal when she was sleeping with my husband? "So, what's new with you?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. She launched into a story about her latest work drama, and I nodded along, barely listening. I was watching her face, looking for any sign of guilt or discomfort, but there was nothing. Either she was an incredible actress, or what? I didn't know what to think anymore. As she talked, I noticed her phone on the table. She'd always been terrible about locking it. When she got up to use the restroom, I did something I'm not proud of. I grabbed her phone and quickly scrolled through her messages. There were plenty from Mark, but they all seemed innocent enough. Work-related stuff, friendly chats, nothing incriminating. I put the phone back just as she returned, feeling like the world's worst friend. But wasn't she the one betraying me? Or was I just paranoid? I left that coffee date more confused than ever. Back at home, I tried a new tactic. I suggested to Mark that we swap phones for a day, just for fun. "It'll be like when we first started dating," I said, forcing a laugh. "Remember how we used to do that?" He looked at me like I'd grown a second head. "Why would we do that? We're not kids anymore, Sarah." "I just thought it might be fun," I said, trying to keep my cool. "But if you've got something to hide?" His face hardened. "I don't have anything to hide. I just value my privacy, and my work emails are confidential." We stared at each other for a long moment, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Finally, I backed down, but his reaction only made me more suspicious. I even considered installing a tracking app on his phone, but I couldn't figure out how to do it without him noticing. Plus, the thought of going that far made me feel sick. What had happened to us? When did we become these people who couldn't trust each other? Weeks went by, and I felt like I was going crazy. I was constantly on edge. After another failed attempt to access his email, I broke down. I sat on our bedroom floor, surrounded by post-it notes covered in potential passwords, and just sobbed. What was I doing? This wasn't me. I'd never been the jealous, suspicious type before, but now it was consuming me. As I sat there crying, I heard Mark come home. I quickly gathered up my notes and shoved them under the bed. I wiped my eyes and tried to compose myself, but it was too late. He walked in and saw me sitting on the floor, my eyes red and puffy. "Sarah," he said, his voice soft. "What's wrong?" For a moment, I almost told him everything. How I knew about Emily, how I'd been trying to find proof, how it was tearing me apart. But then I looked at him, really looked at him, and I saw a stranger. This wasn't the man I married. This was someone who could lie to my face day after day. So instead, I just shook my head. "Nothing," I said. "I just had a rough day at work." He nodded, not pressing further. As he turned to leave the room, I saw a flicker of something in his eyes. Relief? Guilt? I couldn't tell anymore. That night, as I lay awake listening to Mark's steady breathing beside me, I made a decision. This couldn't go on. The constant suspicion, the sneaking around, the lies, it was destroying me. I needed to confront Mark, with or without concrete evidence. I needed the truth, whatever it might be. Little did I know, the truth was about to come crashing down on both of us in a way neither of us could have expected. I'd like to say I had some grand plan for uncovering the truth, but honestly, I was running on fumes at this point. My whole life had become about catching Mark in his lie, and it was eating me alive. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't focus on anything else. I was a mess, and I knew it. One night, I decided to take a different approach. Instead of sneaking around, I'd be direct. I waited until Mark got home from work, took a deep breath, and just came out with it. "Mark," I said, my voice shaking a little, "we need to talk about Emily." His face went pale, and for a second, I thought he might confess right then and there. but he quickly composed himself. "What about Emily?" he asked, his voice carefully neutral. "I know something's going on," I said. "I'm not stupid, Mark. The late nights, the secret phone calls, the way you've been acting. Just tell me the truth, please." He looked at me for a long moment, and I could see the wheels turning in his head. Then he sighed. "Sarah, there's nothing going on with Emily. She's just a friend. I've been working on a big project at work, that's all. I'm sorry if I've been distant lately." I wanted to believe him. God, how I wanted to believe him. But the doubt had taken root too deep. "Then why don't you ever talk about this project? Why all the secrecy?" "It's confidential," he said, running a hand through his hair. "I can't discuss the details, even with you. I'm sorry, but that's just how it is." We went back and forth like this for hours. Me, pushing for answers, and Mark, deflecting with vague explanations and apologies. By the end of it, I was exhausted and no closer to the truth than I'd been before. After that night, things got even worse. Mark became more secretive than ever, always locking his phone and laptop. He'd leave the room to take calls, and more than once, I caught him deleting messages before I could see them. I felt like I was losing my mind. Was I just being paranoid? Was there really nothing going on, and I was destroying our marriage over nothing? Or was Mark just that good at hiding his affair? I needed help. I couldn't keep doing this alone. So I did something I never thought I'd do. I called my mom and told her everything. "Oh, honey," she said when I finished pouring my heart out. "I'm so sorry you're going through this, but you need to be sure before you accuse him of anything. Have you considered hiring a private investigator?" I laughed bitterly. "Mom, I can't afford that, and even if I could, isn't that a bit extreme?" "More extreme than driving yourself crazy with suspicion," she countered. "Sometimes you need to fight fire with fire, sweetheart." I thought about it for days. The idea of hiring someone to follow my husband made me sick to my stomach. But wasn't that better than this constant uncertainty? In the end, I decided against it, not because I thought it was wrong, but because I was afraid of what they might find. As long as I didn't have concrete proof, I could still cling to the hope that I was wrong about everything. Instead, I threw myself into work. I took on extra projects, stayed late at the office, anything to keep my mind off Mark and Emily. It helped a little. At least when I was buried in spreadsheets and financial reports, I wasn't imagining my husband in another woman's arms, but I couldn't escape it completely. Every time my phone buzzed, my heart would race, thinking it might be Mark canceling dinner plans or making up another excuse to work late. Every time I saw a blonde woman on the street, I'd do a double take, wondering if it was Emily. One day, about a month after my confrontation with Mark, I was at work when my colleague, Jane, came up to my desk. "Hey, Sarah," she said, looking uncomfortable. "Can we talk for a sec?" I nodded, my stomach immediately tying itself in knots. Jane led me to an empty conference room and closed the door. "Look," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. "I don't know if I should be telling you this, but I saw Mark yesterday. At that little Italian place downtown, he was with a woman, blonde, pretty. They looked close." My world tilted on its axis. I gripped the edge of the table to steady myself. "Are you sure it was him?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Jane nodded. "I'm sure. I'm so sorry, Sarah. I thought you should know." I thanked her, somehow managed to gather my things, and left the office. I don't remember the drive home. All I could think was, I was right. I was right all along. When I got home, the house was empty. Mark had texted earlier saying he had a late meeting. Another lie. I sat on our bed, the bed we'd shared for 10 years, and tried to figure out what to do next. Part of me wanted to pack a bag and leave, just walk away from all of it. But a bigger part of me was angry. No, not angry. Furious. How dare he do this to me? How dare he lie to my face day after day? I decided then and there that I wasn't going to run. I wasn't going to be the victim in this story. I was going to confront Mark, and this time, I wasn't going to back down until I got the truth. As I sat there, planning what I'd say to him, I heard a noise from downstairs. Mark was home. This was it, the moment of truth. I took a deep breath, steeled myself, and headed downstairs. Little did I know, the confrontation I was about to have would change everything in ways I could never have imagined. I walked down those stairs with my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst out of my chest. I found Mark in the kitchen, rummaging through the fridge like it was just another normal night. The sight of him acting so casual made my blood boil. "How was your meeting?" I asked, my voice dripping with sarcasm. He turned, a look of surprise on his face. "Oh, hey, it was fine. Just ran a bit late." "Really?" I said, crossing my arms. That's interesting because Jane from work saw you at that little Italian place downtown, with a blonde woman. Care to explain that?" The color drained from Mark's face. For a moment, he just stood there, mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Then he seemed to deflate. "Sarah, I can explain," he started, but I cut him off. "Don't," I snapped. "Don't you dare try to lie to me again. I want the truth, Mark, all of it, now." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. Okay, you're right. I wasn't at a meeting. I was having dinner with Emily." Hearing him say her name felt like a punch to the gut. "Emily," I repeated. "My best friend, Emily. How long has this been going on?" Mark looked away, unable to meet my eyes. "A few months," he mumbled. "A few months," I echoed, feeling numb. "And were you ever going to tell me? Or were you just going to keep lying to my face?" He had the decency to look ashamed. "I don't know. I didn't mean for any of this to happen." I laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "Oh, you didn't mean for it to happen? What? Did you just trip and fall into bed with her?" "It's not like that," Mark protested. We connected. She understands me in a way that, look, I'm sorry, Sarah. I never wanted to hurt you." "Well, congratulations," I spat. "You failed spectacularly at that." We stood there in silence for what felt like hours. The man I'd loved for over a decade, the man I thought I knew better than anyone in the world, suddenly felt like a stranger. "I want you out," I finally said, my voice surprisingly steady. "Pack a bag and leave, now." Mark's eyes widened. "Sarah, come on. Can't we talk about this?" "Talk about what?" I asked. "How you've been lying to me for months. How you've been sleeping with my best friend behind my back." "No, I don't think we have anything to talk about." He opened his mouth to argue, but something in my expression must have stopped him. Without another word, he went upstairs. I heard him moving around, opening drawers, zipping up a bag. When he came back down, he paused at the bottom of the stairs. "I am sorry," he said softly. "For what it's worth." I didn't respond. I just watched as he walked out the door, closing it quietly behind him. And just like that, I was alone. The silence in the house was deafening. I stood there in the kitchen, surrounded by the remnants of the life we'd built together. Photos on the fridge, his coffee mug in the sink, the ugly clock he'd insisted on buying hanging on the wall. It all felt like it belonged to someone else now. I don't know how long I stood there, but eventually, I found myself moving. I went to the living room, to the cabinet where we kept the good whiskey. I poured myself a generous glass and sank onto the couch. As I sat there, sipping my drink and staring at nothing, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Emily. "Can we talk?" it said. I stared at those 3 words, feeling a fresh wave of anger and betrayal wash over me. I threw the phone across the room, hearing it clatter against the wall. The sound seemed to break something inside me. Suddenly, I was sobbing. Great, heaving sobs that shook my whole body. I cried for my marriage, for the future I thought we'd have, for the trust that had been shattered beyond repair. I cried until I had no tears left, until I was empty and exhausted. When I finally stopped, I felt different. The pain was still there, raw and throbbing, But underneath it was something else. A spark of anger, of determination. I'd been wronged, yes, but I wasn't going to let this destroy me. I got up, went to the bathroom, and looked at myself in the mirror. My eyes were red and puffy, my hair a mess, but I was still standing, still breathing, still me. "You're going to be okay," I told my reflection. "You're stronger than this." I splashed some cold water on my face and took a deep breath. Then I went back to the living room, picked up my phone, thankfully not broken, and blocked both Mark and Emily's numbers. I didn't want to hear their excuses or apologies. I was done with both of them. Next, I called my mom. It was late, but she answered on the second ring. "Sarah, is everything okay?" "No," I said, my voice cracking. "But it will be. Can I come stay with you for a few days?" "Of course, sweetheart," she said without hesitation. "I'll make up the guest room." After I hung up, I went upstairs and packed a bag. As I was zipping it up, I caught sight of our wedding photo on the dresser. Without thinking, I picked it up and hurled it across the room. The sound of shattering glass was surprisingly satisfying. I left the broken frame and glass on the floor, let Mark clean it up when he came back for the rest of his things. I was done cleaning up his messes. As I drove to my mom's house, I felt a strange mix of emotions: sadness, anger, fear, but also a glimmer of something else: hope, maybe, or determination. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing for sure. I was going to be okay. It might take time, it might be hard, but I was going to get through this. And who knew, maybe someday, I'd even be grateful for this moment, because it was the moment I decided to stop being a victim and start taking control of my life. The moment I decided that no matter what Mark and Emily had done, they weren't going to break me. This was the beginning of my new story. And this time, I was going to be the hero, not the victim. I woke up the next morning in my old bedroom at Mom's house, feeling like I'd been hit by a truck. For a split second, I forgot why I was there. Then it all came crashing back. Mark, Emily, the affair, the confrontation. God, what a mess. Mom was already up when I stumbled into the kitchen, bleary-eyed and exhausted. She took one look at me and wordlessly poured me a cup of coffee. "Thanks," I mumbled, slumping into a chair at the kitchen table. She sat across from me, her face full of concern. "Do you want to talk about it?" I shook my head. "Not really, but I guess I should." So I told her everything: the suspicions, the investigation, the confrontation. By the time I finished, my coffee was cold and Mom looked like she wanted to hunt Mark down herself. "That no good lying," she started, but I cut her off. "It's okay, Mom." "Well, it's not okay, but I don't know. I just feel numb." She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "It's okay to not be okay, sweetie. You've been through a lot." I nodded, fighting back tears. I don't know what to do now." "Well," Mom said, her voice taking on that determined tone I knew so well. "First things first, we need to get you a good lawyer." I blinked at her. "A lawyer? Mom, I don't even know if I want a divorce yet." She fixed me with a stern look. "Sarah, honey, I know you're hurting, but that man betrayed you in the worst way possible. With your best friend, no less, you need to protect yourself." Deep down, I knew she was right. But the thought of actually ending my marriage, it made everything feel so final. Just then, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Mark. "Can we talk, please?" I stared at the screen, my finger hovering over the reply button. Part of me wanted to hear him out, to give him a chance to explain. But a bigger part knew that no explanation could justify what he'd done. "What is it?" Mom asked, noticing my expression. "It's Mark," I said. "He wants to talk." Mom's face hardened. "And what are you going to do?" I took a deep breath and deleted the message. Nothing. I'm not ready to talk to him. She nodded approvingly. Good girl. Now, let's call that lawyer. The next few days were a blur of legal consultations and paperwork. I filed for divorce, citing infidelity. It felt surreal, like I was watching someone else's life fall apart. Mark kept trying to contact me. Calls, texts, even a few emails. I ignored them all. Emily tried too, but I blocked her number. The betrayal from her hurt almost as much as Mark's. She was supposed to be my best friend, and she'd stabbed me in the back. A week after I'd left home, I decided it was time to go back and get some more of my things. Mom offered to come with me, but I knew this was something I had to do alone. The house felt different when I walked in, colder, somehow, empty, even though all our stuff was still there. I went upstairs to our bedroom, my bedroom now, and started packing. As I was going through the closet, I found a box I didn't recognize. Curious, I opened it. Inside were letters, dozens of them, all addressed to Emily in Mark's handwriting. My hands shook as I picked up the first one. I knew I shouldn't read it, that it would only hurt me more, but I couldn't stop myself. My dearest Emily, it began. I can't stop thinking about you, about us. What we have is special, rare. I know it's complicated, but I can't imagine my life without you now. I dropped the letter like it had burned me. Tears blurred my vision as I shoved the box back into the closet. I couldn't bear to read anymore. Just then, I heard the front door open. Footsteps on the stairs. My heart raced as I realized Mark was home. He appeared in the doorway looking surprised to see me. "Sarah," he said, his voice soft. "I didn't know you'd be here." I straightened up, wiping my eyes. "I'm just getting some of my things." He nodded, shifting uncomfortably. "Look, can we talk, please? I know I messed up, but..." "Messed up?" I interrupted, my voice rising. "You didn't mess up, Mark. You destroyed everything we had. You lied to me, cheated on me, made me think I was going crazy. And for what? For her?" His face crumpled. "I'm sorry. I never meant for any of this to happen. I love you, Sarah. I made a mistake, but we can work through this. We can fix this." I laughed bitterly. "Fix this? There's nothing to fix, Mark. It's broken. We're broken. And you know what? I'm glad. Because now I can see you for who you really are." "What's that supposed to mean?" he asked, a hint of anger creeping into his voice. "It means you're a liar and a cheat," I spat. "It means I deserve better than you. It means this marriage is over." He took a step towards me, his eyes pleading. "Sarah, please, don't do this. I'll do anything. We can go to counseling. I'll quit my job, anything you want. Just don't throw away 10 years over one mistake." For a moment, I wavered. 10 years was a long time. We'd built a life together, had dreams for the future. Could I really walk away from all of that? But then I remembered the letters in the closet, the months of lies and deception, the look on his face when he'd finally admitted to the affair. "It wasn't one mistake, Mark," I said, my voice steady now. "It was a choice you made every day for months, and now I'm making my choice. I choose me. I choose a life without lies and betrayal. I choose to be happy." I grabbed my bag and pushed past him, heading for the stairs. He called after me, but I didn't look back. As I walked out of the house, our house, for the last time, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. This wasn't the end. It was a new beginning. And for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. After that confrontation with Mark, I felt like I was in free fall. One minute, I'd feel strong and empowered, ready to take on the world. The next, I'd be curled up in bed, crying my eyes out, wondering how my life had fallen apart so quickly. Mom was a rock through it all. She'd bring me tea when I couldn't get out of bed and kick my butt when I needed to face the world. "You're stronger than this, Sarah," she'd say. "Don't let them win." But it wasn't that easy. Everywhere I looked, there were reminders of my old life, the life I thought I'd have forever. I'd see a happy couple walking down the street and feel a pang of jealousy. I'd get a work email about a colleague's engagement and have to fight back tears. One day, about a month after I'd moved out, I hit rock bottom. I was scrolling through social media. I know, bad idea, when I saw a post from Emily. She was at some fancy restaurant, smiling at the camera, and there, in the background, was Mark. I lost it. I threw my phone across the room and just broke down. I cried until I couldn't breathe, until my whole body ached. How could they do this? How could they be so happy when I was in so much pain? Mom found me like that, curled up on the floor of my childhood bedroom. She didn't say anything, just sat down next to me and held me while I cried. When I finally calmed down, she looked me in the eye and said, "Okay, enough is enough. You're going to get up, take a shower, and we're going out." I tried to protest, but she wouldn't hear it. An hour later, I found myself at a local community center, staring at a flyer for a support group for divorced women. "Mom, I don't know about this," I said, fidgeting with my purse strap. She gave me a gentle push towards the door. "Just try it. What have you got to lose?" So I went in, feeling awkward and out of place. But as I listened to these women share their stories, something inside me started to shift. These women had been through hell just like me, but they were still standing, still fighting, still living. One woman, Jessica, talked about how her ex-husband had left her for his secretary. "I thought my life was over," she said. "But you know what? It was just beginning. I went back to school, got my degree, started my own business. Now I'm happier than I ever was with him." Her words struck a chord in me. Could that be me someday? Could I turn this pain into something positive? After the meeting, Jessica came up to me. "First time?" she asked with a knowing smile. I nodded, feeling shy. "On that obvious, huh?" she laughed. "We've all been there. Listen, a bunch of us are going for coffee. Want to join?" I hesitated for a moment, then thought, why not? What else was I going to do? Sit at home and mope? That coffee changed everything. For the first time since the divorce, I felt normal. These women got it. They understood the pain, the anger, the fear. But they also showed me that there was life after divorce. As we were leaving, Jessica handed me a business card. "I'm a life coach," she explained. "If you ever want to talk, give me a call." I tucked the card into my wallet, not thinking much of it at the time. But a few days later, after another sleepless night wondering where my life was going, I pulled it out and made the call. Jessica was amazing. She didn't just listen to me vent, though there was plenty of that. She challenged me, made me think about what I really wanted from life. "You're not just Mark's ex-wife," she'd say, or "You're Sarah. Who is Sarah? What does she want?" It was a tough question. For so long, I'd defined myself as part of a couple. Now I had to figure out who I was on my own. With Jessica's encouragement, I started making small changes. I joined a gym, started taking a photography class I'd always been interested in, but never had time for. I even started volunteering at a local animal shelter. Slowly but surely, I started to feel like myself again. Or maybe a new version of myself, a stronger version. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. There were still bad days. Days when I'd see a reminder of my old life and feel like I was right back at square one. Days when the thought of facing the world seemed impossible. On one of those days, I was sitting at home, wallowing in self-pity, when my phone buzzed. It was a text from Jessica. "Hey, we need an extra player for our volleyball game tonight. You in?" My first instinct was to say no. I was in no mood for socializing, but then I remembered something Jessica had told me in one of our sessions. Sometimes, the thing you least want to do is exactly what you need. So I forced myself off the couch, put on some workout clothes, and went to the game. And you know what? It was fun. For a few hours, I forgot about Mark and Emily and all the drama. I was just Sarah, playing volleyball with her friends. As I was leaving, sweaty and smiling for the first time in days, Jessica pulled me aside. "I'm proud of you," she said. "You're doing the work. It's not easy, but you're doing it." Her words hit me hard. I was doing the work. It wasn't always pretty, and it certainly wasn't easy. But I was moving forward. For the first time in months, I felt a glimmer of hope. That night, as I lay in bed, I thought about how far I'd come. I wasn't okay yet, not by a long shot, but I was getting there. And for now, that was enough. I fell asleep with a small smile on my face, dreaming of the new life I was building, a life that was all mine. As the months went by, I started to feel more like myself again, or maybe a new version of myself, stronger, more independent. I'd moved out of Mom's place and into a small apartment of my own. It wasn't much, but it was mine, and that meant something. One morning, I woke up feeling different. I couldn't put my finger on it at first. Then I realized, for the first time in ages, I hadn't dreamed about Mark. I hadn't woken up with that familiar ache in my chest. Instead, I felt okay. Not great, not amazing, but okay. And after everything I'd been through, okay felt pretty damn good. I got ready for work with a spring in my step. As I was leaving, I caught sight of myself in the mirror. I barely recognized the woman staring back at me. Gone was the defeated, hollow-eyed shell I'd been for so long. In her place was someone with a spark in her eye and a determined set to her jaw. I liked this new Sarah. At work, I threw myself into a big project. My boss had been understanding about my personal issues, but I knew I needed to step up my game. And you know what? I crushed it. When I presented my findings to the board, they were impressed. So impressed that they offered me a promotion on the spot. As I left the meeting, still in shock from the news, I bumped into Tom from accounting. "Hey, Sarah," he said with a smile. "A bunch of us are going out for drinks to celebrate Jen's birthday. Want to join?" In the past, I would have made an excuse. But the new Sarah? She said yes. That night at the bar, surrounded by my coworkers, I felt a sense of belonging I hadn't experienced in a long time. We laughed. We drank. We shared stories. And for the first time in forever, I didn't once think about Mark or Emily. As I was leaving, Tom caught up with me outside. "Hey, this might be totally out of line," he said, looking nervous. "But would you maybe want to grab coffee sometime?" I hesitated for a moment. Was I ready for this? But then I thought, why not? It was just coffee. "Sure," I said, surprising myself. "I'd like that." The next few weeks were a whirlwind. I threw myself into my new role at work, determined to prove they'd made the right choice. I started going to the gym regularly, not to lose weight or impress anyone, but because it made me feel strong and alive. And yes, I went on that coffee date with Tom, and a few more after that. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. One day, as I was leaving the grocery store, I ran smack into Emily. We both froze, staring at each other like deer in headlights. "Sarah," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. How are you?" I looked at her, this woman who had once been my best friend, who I'd shared secrets with, cried with, laughed with, and now she was a stranger who had betrayed me in the worst possible way. For a moment, I felt the old anger and hurt rising up. But then, something strange happened. I realized I didn't care anymore. Emily, Mark, their betrayal, it all seemed so small, so insignificant compared to the life I was building for myself. "I'm good, Emily," I said, and I meant it. Really good, actually. I hope you are too. I walked away before she could respond, feeling lighter than I had in months. It was like I'd finally put down a heavy burden I didn't even know I was carrying. That night, I got a call from my lawyer. The divorce was final. It was over. Really, truly over. I sat on my couch, letting the news sink in. I'd thought I'd feel sad or angry or something, but all I felt was relief and a sense of excitement about what the future might hold. I called Mom to share the news. "Oh, honey," she said. "How are you feeling?" I thought about it for a moment. "I'm okay, Mom. Actually, I'm better than okay. I'm free." After we hung up, I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I danced, right there in my living room, music blaring. I danced like no one was watching. Because no one was, it was just me, and that was more than enough. The next day, I woke up to a text from Mark. My heart skipped a beat when I saw his name, but not from longing or pain, just surprise. I heard the divorce is final, the message read. I know it doesn't mean much now, but I'm sorry for everything. I hope you're happy, Sarah. You deserve it. I stared at the message for a long time, unsure how to feel. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to keep him firmly in my past where he belonged. But another part recognized this for what it was, closure. So I typed out a simple reply. Thank you, Mark. I am happy. I hope you are too. As I hit send, I felt the last piece of my old life fall away. It was scary, but exhilarating too. For the first time in my adult life, I was truly on my own. No husband, no best friend holding me back. Just me, facing the world head on. That evening, I met up with my support group friends for dinner. As we sat around the table, sharing stories and laughter, I looked at these amazing women who had been broken, just like me, but who had put themselves back together, stronger, braver, more resilient than ever. To new beginnings, Jessica said, raising her glass in a toast. To new beginnings, we all echoed. As I clinked my glass with theirs, I felt a surge of gratitude for these friends who had become my lifeline, for my mom who had been my rock, for Tom who was showing me that not all men were like Mark, but most of all, for myself, for the woman I had become through all of this. I didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, I was excited to find out. Because whatever came my way, I knew I could handle it. I was Sarah Thompson, survivor, fighter, and one hell of a strong woman. And my story, it was just beginning.